When we think about organized crime in Mexico, what's the first name that comes to mind? El Cartel de Sinaloa, the Sinaloa Cartel. That's the brand name dominating the headlines these days, who Americans now associate with fentanyl and kingpins and cartel violence at the southern border, and who fake news channels like ours have been using as clickbait for years. But what if I told you that the most powerful and violent Mexican criminal organizations are located more than 1,000 miles from Sinaloa, on the eastern edge of Mexico, home to the new frontier of the country's never-ending war on cartels? We decided to take a trip to the state of Coahuila to embed ourselves with Mexican security forces on the front lines of this new battle to find out who the players are and how the cops are fighting back. Before we get started, as usual, please take a minute to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We really appreciate it. All right, órale cabrones, vámonos.
The days of the overt cartels, at least in this region, I think they're gone. People just think about cartels and they think about drugs. It's human trafficking, it's extortion, it's money laundering.
When it came to the Zetas, there was nothing but violence. The more violent that you were, the more ruthless that you were, the more cruel that you were with your opponents, the higher that you rose, because that was their business model. That's the way the Zetas operated. How many innocent people did they kill? I couldn't even tell you. I couldn't give you a number.
The state of Coahuila is a vast, sparsely populated desert region in northeastern Mexico. It's not quite on the east coast, but it's also not in the middle of the country either. Think of it as the Pennsylvania of Mexico. It shares a border with Chihuahua to the west, Nuevo León and Nuevo Laredo to the east, Tamaulipas to the south, and along its northern border, the United States. Most of the land in Coahuila is uninhabitable and impassable. Its only border city, Piedras Negras, sits across the Rio Grande River from Eagle Pass, Texas, the site of 1,000 illegal migrant crossings per day under the Biden administration. Coahuila's largest city is called Saltillo, tucked into the southeastern corner of the state. While nobody in the American press covering the cartels knows or cares about this place, Coahuila and Saltillo were ground zero in the war against the Zeta cartel, without a doubt the most brutally violent, insane criminal organization in the history of Mexico and maybe the world.
The more violent that you were, the more ruthless that you were, the more cruel that you were with your opponents, the higher that you rose. The most violent hitmen were the most valued, and that was how you ascended within the organization. All of the limits of violence that we speak about, the Zeta organization broke through. They broke through every level of violence because that was their business model. That's the way the Zetas operated. The Zetas' operating model was violence.
Saltillo was their stronghold, their base of operations for the entire region. From 2009 to 2014, the Zetas fought a war against the government that left thousands of people dead and disappeared, and committed untold atrocities like the 2011 Allende massacre, in which they kidnapped and murdered over 300 innocent people outside the city of Allende, and then had the victims' bodies incinerated in diesel fuel. Zeta violence was so out of control that it eventually galvanized law enforcement from the entire region against them, and by 2015, most of its members had been arrested or killed.
The Zetas became overly powerful and bold, and they made too much noise.
But just like every criminal element in Mexico, the cartel never really dies. It just morphs into something new.
The Zetas are gone, but not gone. I mean, some of their tradecraft, some of the ways that used to operate are still surviving in cartels like the Northwestern Cartel, Cartel del Noroeste, which is around and
the
active.
Northeastern Cartel.
Yeah.
The surviving members of the Zetas and their descendants make up what is today known as El Cartel del Noroeste, or the Northeast Cartel, who now rival the Gulf Cartel as the most powerful criminal group in eastern Mexico. Their stronghold is in the border city of Nuevo Laredo, but they also control territory in Monterrey, to the east in Matamoros, and as far south as the lucrative port city of Tampico. At times, their brutality mirrors the tactics inherited from the days of the Zetas, and early this year they had the honor of making Trump's specially designated foreign terrorist organizations list. But let me tell you something, they don't give a f. They're going for it. While the U.S. Justice Department and talking heads in mainstream media stay fixated on fentanyl sensationalism and the drama in Culiacan between the remnants of the Sinaloa cartel, the east coast of Mexico is getting money. Led by the Northeast Cartel and the Gulf Cartel, these organizations have doubled down on their criminal rackets. Enormous meth trafficking. I'm talking multi-hundred-ton loads getting shipped into the U.S. every day. Cocaine use is also surging upward in America, and the corridor through eastern Mexico from South America into the United States has become the primary cocaine route, moving through ports of entry in Matamoros and Nuevo Laredo. Migrant smuggling is the only victory the Trump administration can claim, as these crossings have fallen off by 95% since he took office. But the cartels don't seem to mind. They just made a smooth billion under Biden, and they've moved on to other things, including a favorite cartel pastime, oil and gasoline theft, which was also a huge moneymaker for the original Zeta organization.
The other day, huge headline, the government seized, don't even know how many tons of stolen fuel.
Yeah.
Stolen fuel's a big one now.
Huachicol.
Huachicol, that's the practice of huachicol.
It's like another diversification of some of the business that they run. Like a lot of people just think about cartels and they think about drugs. It's human trafficking, it's extortion, it's money laundering, it's huachicoleo. It's like there's a lot of heads that are now kind of forming around the fact that probably fentanyl and fentanyl trafficking is going out of the way.
Yeah.
So what do we dedicate our resources to now? So there's some million things that they can put their money into.
There's a million ways to get it.
Now the Northeast Cartel is pushing deep into southern Tamaulipas, battling against the Jalisco New Generation Cartel for the strategically vital port of Tampico, which is a launching pad for meth and cocaine destined for Europe and Asia. While it's true that many cartel hot zones in Mexico have been pacified in recent years, in the regions controlled by the Northeast Cartel, it looks like the old days. Cartel tank fighting, armed convoys with 50 caliber machine guns parading through the desert, drone warfare on military targets, and the assassination of police chiefs, military personnel, and politicians. This is all still business as usual for the offspring of the Zetas, the most shockingly violent criminal group in modern history. Yet, amazingly, despite being surrounded by cartel territory, the one state in the entire region that is currently free of all cartel presence is Coahuila. The place where just a decade ago, it was normal to see beheaded bodies hanging from freeway overpasses, and where citizens were too afraid to go out after dark. It is now the only state in eastern Mexico that has been completely purged of organized crime. How is that possible? And why can't it be done in the rest of Mexico? I had to go down there and see for myself. The first stop on my journey was to the city of Monterrey, where I was met by my compadre, the Mexican Jason-born Ed Calderon. Monterrey is one of the wealthiest places in Mexico, home to some of the country's biggest industries.
It looks like a place in Spain or in Europe.
Yeah, it's like an out-of-place area. It doesn't look like, it shouldn't be here, is what I get a lot of people saying. And specifically with the difference from this place to where we're about to kind of like travel to, there's going to be a stark difference.
It's been compared to Dallas in terms of its size, affluence, and education. There's country clubs and Michelin star restaurants and American shopping centers. There was even a massive rock and roll music festival happening while we were there. It's unfathomable that a city this cosmopolitan and this close to the United States could be brought to its knees by organized crime. But just 10 years ago, that's exactly what happened. The Zetas originated in the late 1990s as an armed security wing of the Gulf Cartel. They were comprised of a band of defectors from an elite branch of the Mexican military, basically like if the Navy SEALs broke off and went to work for a drug cartel. Over the years, they recruited more and more defectors from the military. And then in 2009, after the arrest and extradition of a key leader of the Gulf Cartel, the Zetas violently broke off from them to form their own cartel. And for the next 8 years, they unleashed a blitzkrieg of brutality that was unprecedented, even by Mexico's standards.
When it came to the Zetas, there was nothing but violence. How many innocent people did they kill? I couldn't even tell you. I couldn't give you a number. They weren't like drug cartels. They didn't operate like drug traffickers. They weren't like typical drug traffickers who build schools and help people and who buy them things, invest in hospitals, buy them water pumps, whatever. These people were about violence and more violence. All of the money that they made, they generated through violence and through the threat of violence.
In qué? In extorsión or?
Yes, through extortion. For example, they would approach a businessman and say, "Tomorrow you're going to pay me 100,000 pesos per month." Then if the businessman or the business owner told them that they didn't want to pay, instead of asking them again, they would just burn the business down.
They descended onto Monterrey and Saltillo before anyone knew what was happening. From the beginning, it was obvious this was no ordinary cartel. Check out what the leader of the Coahuila police had to say about their training and weaponry.
At the beginning of the war, they had the upper hand because they had automatic weapons. Back then, the AR-15 and the 223 were not used much by them. What they used most was the automatic, the AK-47. How they were trained and how they operated was very professional. They were very good at it. It was very similar to us, almost exactly the way that we were trained in the police academy. What was up with that? Anytime that we wanted to act or to make a move or a counter ambush on them, they would already know about it. And what was even worse, they didn't follow the rules the way that we have to. And what were they doing? They were using a ton of ammunition, a ton of automatic weapons, and there were many more of them than there were of us.
As we find out years after the war, many of these original Zeta leaders reportedly received training in commando and urban warfare from Israeli and U.S. Special Forces, some of them at the School of the Americas in Fort Benning, Georgia, infamous for having trained Latin American militias and militaries throughout the decades in advanced torture techniques.
Everything the Zetas learned, they learned from foreigners. All of the things Zetas learned, like the guerrilla warfare stuff, I don't know exactly in what other countries they learned things from, but much of what they learned in the United States. Everything that was professional, they learned in the United States. Because at that time, the gafes, the commanders, were sent to learn at the School of the Americas. They sent them to train with the Rangers and train with the Navy SEALs. In what? I can't say exactly.
The fact that a group as bloody and murderous as the Zetas was born out of the School of the Americas is just one of the many examples throughout history. The Zetas were the first criminal organization in Mexico to operate more like a terrorist group than a drug cartel. In fact, most of their criminal enterprises did not involve trafficking drugs into the United States. They simply taxed other drug traffickers and then killed them and their families if they refused to pay.
That's one of the ways that they operated. They would come wanting to make alliances, but if other groups refused, they would take it by force and violence. You know what they would do? They would arrive at a place and tell the vendors and dealers who had been there for a while and who had customers that they worked for them now. And if they refused, the Zetas would kill them.
They were also heavily involved in stealing oil from the Pemex oil pipelines, which is today still a multi-$100 billion a year business for the cartels. But probably their most lucrative racket was the complete domination of the domestic drug trade throughout cities up and down eastern Mexico, including Saltillo and Monterrey. These are enormous places with a huge internal demand for drugs, especially crystal meth. Using their advanced surveillance techniques and military training, the Zetas would move into a slum neighborhood, identify el punto de venta, the point of sale or the dope spot, and then torture the dealers into taxation and compliance. They went scorched earth. They didn't make alliances with other groups, they took them over with brute force, and then committed atrocities that are comparable to the Taliban or ISIS.
So in those times, there were many kidnappings of comrades, and not just of police officers. There were kidnappings of soldiers, there were kidnappings of Marines, there were kidnappings of police chiefs, and they used those kidnappings to generate terror among us, a very visually intense terror. You might have heard of this, the first video that started it all, the propaganda video that was circulating on social media. This person who was sat down and then had his throat cut. Then they stuck a knife through his trachea and waited for him to drown in his own blood. That was the first video to break social media, and every day since you've seen other videos similar. They cut their windpipes and then wait for them to die, they cut off their heads, others get beaten to death. There's an infinite variety of ways to commit this torture.
Beheadings, flayings, and castrations, and decomposing bodies in diesel fuel.
The people in these organized crime groups referred to them as kitchens. And what these people would do is they would put the bodies into diesel and then heat the diesel up. And once the diesel reached a certain temperature, the dead bodies would become no more than a gelatinous substance. That's what they would say. And then they would take whatever was left of the body and throw it in the river or throw it someplace else. And there wouldn't be much left.
Not to mention the mass murder of innocent people in their conquest to take territories from rivals. In the city of San Fernando in Tamaulipas state, in back-to-back years, 2010 and 2011, the Zetas hijacked passenger buses on the freeway, kidnapped and murdered hundreds of civilians, and then scattered them throughout 47 different mass graves. One of the most brazen Zeta atrocities was the 2012 fire they set to the Casino Royale in Monterrey. In broad daylight, members of the Zetas barricaded the doors to this casino, then doused the building in gasoline and set it on fire, preventing the casino goers inside from escaping. 52 people were burned alive. And of course, in the state of Coahuila, the most horrendous attack occurred in the town of Allende, where it's believed that up to 500 innocent people were murdered, then dissolved in diesel or buried in mass graves. Here's what happened. In 2011, their organization discovered that a few of their most trusted men in northern Coahuila were cooperating with the DEA against the Trevino brothers, two of the most powerful leaders of the Zetas. The Trevinos found out, and in response, members of the Zetas seized the towns of Allende and Nava, destroyed 80 houses with heavy machinery, and kidnapped approximately 80 families. These people were never seen again, until authorities began uncovering some of their bodies, many of which allegedly had been dissolved with a mixture of diesel fuel and caustic soda in large barrels of improvised kitchens. There's a great series out right now on Netflix about the Allende massacre called Somos. I definitely recommend you check it out. It's hard to imagine how the Zetas thought they could get away with it. Even in Mexico, where violence is a currency and law enforcement's #1 priority is about keeping up appearances rather than actually fighting crime, the Zetas were doing way too much. They were the narcos version of ISIS, and there wasn't enough bribe money in the world they could pay politicians that would allow them to keep operating the way they were, at least not in the state of Coahuila. The man who calls himself Sombra remembers the Zeta wars vividly.
Check it out. They had different people operating in different functions within the organization. First, you had people who operated as hawks or lookouts. Then others operated as hitmen. And then there were others who operated as the drug dealers, people who were put in charge of selling narcotics. Other people were in charge of mobilizing economic resources. It really was like a mini company or a mini corporation.
And when you say hawks, what do you mean by hawks?
The hawks were the people in charge of feeding information to the operational groups and to the plaza bosses about everything that was happening in the city. I mean information about everything, not just the movement of the governments, but intel about other organized crime groups and politicians. They extracted information about businessmen. They extracted information about companies, information about everything.
The people of Coahuila refer to those years as El Tiempo Oscuro, the dark times. Sombra is the commander of Policía de Acción y Reacción de Coahuila, a group of tactical state police forces in Coahuila who were formed specifically to hunt down and kill Zetas. Today, they've got armored vehicles and high-tech Israeli machine guns, but back at the beginning of the Zeta war, they were outgunned and outmanned.
We've heard rumors about drones carrying bombs, that about mines that explode on impact. Tell us about the capabilities that they have, that you've seen.
Well, in this region specifically, the most powerful weapon the enemy has is the 50 caliber machine gun, as well as grenades. And yes, back then they did have drones. Today they don't. Yes, and also mines.
Dozens of Sombra's men were kidnapped and killed in the early years of the war. It was common for him to get text messages on his phone showing his fellow police being tortured and murdered by the Zetas. Enfrentamientos, or shootouts, with convoys of armed cartel tanks with 50 caliber machine guns were a daily occurrence.
In that era, it was all of the time, every day, and at any moment. Much of the time, we didn't sleep at all. I would think to myself, I don't know how this is going to end. Would they be able to kill me? Or could I finally get some rest? Or would they come pick me up and make me disappear like the others? Or, even worse, could they locate my family? All of the time, I was in a defensive, combative mindset. Every day, all of the time, every day. And that's why I tell you it was like a war. Because every day you enter a mental state of survival.
So somebody was getting killed every day.
But little by little, year after year, Sombra's men wore the Zetas down. It didn't sound like they arrested many of them either. Just like Ed Calderon's battalion of special forces officers fighting the cartels in Tijuana, the rule was kill, kill, kill. or arrest, torture for information, and then kill. You won't get many of them to admit it on camera, of course, but this is standard practice in Mexican law enforcement when it comes to dealing with cartels.
When we meet the enemy face to face, there is no truce.
It's probably one of the reasons that cartel sicarios fire on military and police as soon as they see them. They know that they won't be taken alive. Here's what one member of Sombra's team who was involved in heavy fighting back then had to say about the rules of engagement.
I'll be honest with you. Let me speak sincerely now. They always fire first.
They always fire on you first?
Always.
So they see you and then the shooting starts.
Yes, always. So, for example, in our region, because I can't really speak for other places, the enemy dedicates themselves to ambushes. I have never seen a direct engagement, a direct firefight. It's always ambushes. They use treachery.
Yes, and they must use these as well, these caltrops, huh?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, they put them on sidewalks and on roads and wait for us to drive over them.
Yes, and they use the vegetation of the landscape to disguise themselves.
Looking back, I feel a little silly that I was pressing these guys on human rights abuses. The Zetas don't deserve sympathy. They killed so many police and innocent people alike, and in the most horrendous ways. If anyone deserves to have their rights violated, it was probably them. There's a brutality to Mexican culture that goes back centuries, and much of the blame does belong to the government and to the police force. But these young men are just poor guys from the rural areas who found themselves face to face with the most evil criminal organization to ever exist in Mexico. They were just trying to survive, and the scars they bear to this day are deep.
How does it make you feel when you experience losses on your side?
It hurts. It hurts badly, especially when they're companions. We spend more time with our companions, our brothers in arms, than we spend with our families, and we take care of each other. They're my colleagues, the people you see here now. They're like my own brothers. Far from being just co-workers, these are brothers, brothers in arms, brothers in a mission. My life depends on them, and their lives depend on me. And their deaths, far from making me want to quit, actually give me an anger to go out and want to do more work.
Well, speaking of anger, I experienced many losses of friends during my part of the war. These losses made me feel angry. It made me feel vengeful. It gave me a toxic feeling. And sometimes it would make me feel, and forgive me for saying the word, but a bastard, a mother. Like, I wanted to go catch these guys and search for the enemy high and low.
Guys, let me tell you my strategy for getting rich in the 21st century. I am going to borrow money, fiat currency that's being debased, and I'm going to buy Bitcoin, the hardest money out there. But I need a loan. I need to get a loan. I applied for a loan. I applied for a small business loan against the business, of which I do very well. I still got denied. It makes me murderous just thinking about it. Calm down, Johnny. There's a solution. Should have used Ava. Ava is a credit building app that makes it super simple to improve your credit fast so you can get better rates on loans, pay off debt faster, and keep more money in your pocket. Check it out. I have decent credit. I realized after getting denied for this loan that I simply just didn't have enough of it. I was not paying down bills every month and getting those reported to my credit agency. That's what Ava can do for you. Ava connects all of your monthly payments, like your Netflix subscription, your rent, etc., to credit reporting agencies. So therefore, the payments you're making anyways, you might as well start building your credit history that way. For just $6 a month, you could potentially save thousands or hundreds of thousands, in my case, or 2 Bitcoin. Ava reports your on-time payments to all major credit bureaus every day to help you build positive credit history quickly. The longer you stick with Ava, the higher your score can go. You can build your credit up in just a few months by making these payments using Ava. Ava is the highest rated credit building app with thousands of 5-star reviews. It's the only credit building app rated excellent on Trustpilot and an A+ score with the Better Business Bureau. Download the Ava app, that's AVA, today, and when you join using my promo code CONNECT, you'll get your first month free. This offer is only for my listeners. Again, that's promo code CONNECT. Get the Ava app, AVA, and use promo code CONNECT to get your first month free. That's promo code CONNECT. Thank you to Ava, and now go get yourself good credit. Guys, if it ain't True Classic, I don't want it. All I do is wear True Classic. This is a True Classic t-shirt. I didn't put it on for this ad read. I put it on because I got dressed today. As soon as I started working with True Classic, they quickly turned me into their only clothing customer. True Classic has one mission: to make sure guys look good and feel even better. And trust me, they've nailed it. With the prices, with how they fit and form to my body, my weird skinny waist, my big forearms, nothing about my body evolutionarily makes sense. Why am I 6'6"? It's pretty wild. My mother was a Viking. And for Vikings like me, True Classic is the only way to go. And again, I know things are getting tight out there in the economy with the trade war and such. However, again, True Classic beats other similar clothing in the price point too, like significantly. Forget overpriced designer nonsense. Nobody wants brands on their clothing anymore. It's all about minimalistic. No more bust down. Give me the plain Jane. Huh? And forget about the cheap throwaways. This is not an ad read. It is a paid public service announcement. Yes, that's right. I'm getting paid. But I would tell you this for free. If you're a dude and you want to look your flyest and feel even better and save a ton of money doing it, all you need, the last place that you will need to shop for clothes, is True Classic. True Classic delivers essentials built for real life. Grab yours at Target or Costco, or head over to trueclassic.com/connect to get hooked up today. Once again, that's trueclassic.com with the promo code CONNECT. However, what makes the war on the Zetas in Coahuila even more remarkable is the fact that it united the citizenry along with the government and law enforcement. People called the cops with anonymous tips, came forward if they were being extorted, and law enforcement responded. You know, the way government is supposed to work in an ordinary, well-functioning society.
So, what we started doing is that at any sighting of any operation of any cartel, we started attacking them directly. And we wouldn't let up or sit back until the job was completely finished. And how would we know when the job was finished? Well, for example, if we got a report that there was a group of armed men, and say they were going around picking people up, we would get a description of that vehicle. And then what we would do is we would go after them. We would go after their operations, we would go after their people. And that was when we would rest. And that was the only time that we rested. What would happen is that the tips and complaints from the people would go to 911, and then 911 would pass that information on to us. So, on a given day, if they reported sightings of a blue vehicle with armed people in it in a certain neighborhood, and on the next day we got the same call about the same vehicle with armed people in it, and then on the third day they reported the same thing, and now that blue vehicle was involved in a shooting, we would not rest until we found that blue car.
Furthermore, not only did the police in Coahuila receive real funding and support from the government, every branch of law enforcement, from the local cops all the way up to the military, worked together and shared information.
There was coordination between the state police, the municipal police, and the reaction groups, and all of us coordinated with federal forces. And that really was the most important thing, that all of us coordinated under one single command model. Here, everybody has a security chip, or a security clearance, as you might think of it. And our priorities are twofold. One is the prevention of crime, and two, it is to combat high-impact or violent crime. I think it's this coordination.
This seems like common sense, but it's almost unheard of in Mexico. There is so much corruption, distrust, and disorganization within the ranks of law enforcement that it makes even good, honest police departments want to operate independently of one another. But extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. By the end of 2014, the Zetas had been cleansed from Coahuila. The ones who hadn't been killed or arrested fled west into Zacatecas, or the desert of Chihuahua, and the rest hid out in the border cities of Nuevo Laredo and Matamoros. It seems obvious looking back at it that the Zetas were doomed to failure. Evil and mass murder that egregious can only exist for so long. But the truth is, the Zetas completely changed narco culture in Mexico. The terroristic brutality that they practiced has been adopted by every other major criminal organization in the country. Even in Sinaloa, the cartel that was once known for its altruism and benevolence has descended into indiscriminate killing of civilians in the war that's currently raging in Culiacan. But especially in the south, in Michoacan and Jalisco, and to the far east in Tamaulipas, the shock and awe campaigns of violence and the military-type confrontations with police and rival cartels are just adaptations from the era of the Zetas. In fact, the Nuevo Jalisco cartel, now one of the most powerful organizations in Mexico, actually came into being as a response to the Zetas. They were originally known as Los Mata Zeta, the Zeta Killers, who were sicarios recruited from the state of Jalisco and funded by Chapo Guzman and Mayo Zambada from the Sinaloa Federation. These Mata Zetas were deployed to every Zeta stronghold throughout Mexico with the express purpose of exterminating them. They even put out a public service announcement. We are the new group Mata Zetas, and we are against kidnapping and extortion, and we will fight them in all states for a cleaner Mexico. Imagine that. Also, it can't be confirmed, but it's likely that these Mata Zetas got a lot of help from law enforcement. It's Mexico, so that's almost a guarantee, actually. And at this time, a rising drug lord by the name of Nemesio Oseguero, aka El Mencho, was coming to power in Michoacan. After the Zetas went into hiding and the Sinaloa cartel started to take back their territory, the Mata Zetas were disbanded, and Mencho absorbed them into his new organization called the Jalisco New Generation Cartel.
It could be also a part of the reason for the early success of the Nuevo Jalisco cartel is that they began to traffic drugs to different markets where there were no other groups, like to the European market, for example. That's how they began to generate a lot of money. There was no war, and there were no competitors. Nothing. So that's how it began to grow so quickly and how they generated a ton of money. On the other hand, the Sinaloa cartel and Los Zetas cartel were involved in fighting and disputes at the border with the United States.
That is the origin story of what is now one of Mexico's most powerful drug cartels. Wild. Something like that could only happen in a place like Mexico. What's ironic is, while they aren't quite as violent, today the CJNJ practice the same extortion, kidnappings, and political assassinations as the Zetas once did. And that's really the essence of their legacy. The Zetas transformed Mexican drug cartels into militarized criminal organizations and normalized the taking of profits in rackets far outside the traditional realm of drug trafficking. But in Coahuila, the impact the Zetas left on law enforcement has been a positive one.
A few years back, we started this offensive, and we have not let up. And since then, we continue to fight against them. That's one part of it. The other part of it is that we're professionals. We've been professionalized by our training. Another part of it is the salaries the police get paid here are very good. And police officers receive a lot of support, especially the ones that are on the good side. Bad cops, cops who are on the side of evil, are not covered up for, and they are not helped. I'm not exactly sure what they're doing in other parts of Mexico because I'm not there. I'm here. All I can tell you is here, day and night, we continue the fighting. What exactly is the key here? Maybe it's a change in government. Maybe it's a change in politicians. But what I know is everyone here in Coahuila has followed the same line, and that is security. Security is our #1 priority here in Coahuila. No, I don't think it will ever completely end. But the actions that we are taking here today are different than what we used to do.
Sombra and his tactical units stay at the ready and respond to even the slightest cartel incursion into their territory with maximum force. Also, the state government continues to support their police with higher salaries and better training than cops receive anywhere else in Mexico. But another possible reason for an absence of cartels in Coahuila might have something to do with the state government. You see, the state of Coahuila is still dominated by the PRI, or El PRI, which was the long-standing nationalist political party that dominated Mexico for a century. The PRI is notoriously corrupt, and many people speculate that high-level money deals have been made with top cartel leaders from different regions who are allowed to live in the city of Saltillo with their families in exchange for keeping Coahuila free from a cartel presence. Another possible reason for the absence of cartels in this region could simply be that there's not a lot of money there. Coahuila is landlocked. It doesn't have oil pipelines to steal from, avocado fields to extort, or ports to ship drugs from. All they have is a border with the United States, most of which is a national park with no roads or ports of entry. Migrant smuggling, which was most prevalent through Piedras Negras into Eagle Pass, Texas under the Biden administration, has all but stopped, with crossings down 95% this year under the new Trump regime. The most active that it gets in Coahuila is on its main highway, Interstate 40, which runs through the heart of the state and is a main thoroughfare for meth, cocaine, and weed being transported from western Mexico across the country and north into Monterrey, and finally, Nuevo Laredo and Matamoros, where it is staged, repackaged, and smuggled into the United States. Sombra gave us a tour of one of the checkpoints on I-40 at the border with Nuevo León, the state where Monterrey is located. He says it's routine that they seize multi-ton meth and weed loads coming from the Sinaloa and the Nuevo Jalisco cartels. According to Sombra, the Western cartels are attempting to gain control of the city of Nuevo Laredo, the power base of the Northeast Cartel, which you'll remember is just an offshoot of the old Zetas. In response to this incursion into their city, El Cartel del Noreste has now banned not only selling meth, but using it.
The domestic drug use in Mexico.
Yeah.
The meth market is huge. It's the biggest market.
Yes.
It's what cocaine is to us
Yes.
in the United States.
Yeah. It's also like regional. So certain groups will produce meth
Right.
and want that to be the sales,
Right.
that want that to be the product.
Yeah.
And other groups don't want that to be the product
Right.
because it cuts in their business.
And we learned today in Nuevo Laredo,
Yeah.
if these guys or
Yeah.
the organización caught them smoking meth,
Yeah. Because
they at least get the tabla, they might get killed.
Yeah.
Because they don't want people smoking meth. They want people smoking the coke they bring in.
and this is something I learned. I didn't know
that's
that.
wild.
Every part of Mexico has a different kind of like rule set to it. Specifically this one, I guess, because of how secure it is. Again, these are all outsiders trying to figure out a way to market this product here.
Yeah.
And again, meth is for you to be able to do more in work. This is a working class
Yeah.
community, and I guess Starbucks doesn't want to have like a place here to get double shot espressos.
Yeah.
So meth is the next viable option.
The criminal organizations use these gaps in law enforcement to traffic a lot of things: people, drugs, and weapons
And where are these drugs and people? Where are they getting sent to?
to the United States.
Ah, yes, to the United States. To the border, basically.
Yes, and often they're trying to break through this line of law enforcement. And that's where we come in.
If you're caught in a trap house in the city of Nuevo Laredo smoking crystal meth, you're given the infamous Mexican flogging as punishment, la tabla. That's where they take a big heavy wooden mallet and smack you on your ass until you're screaming in pain. And if you're caught selling it, that's it, you're dead. This is, of course, the cartel's way of literally killing off their rival's drug market. And remember, I told you about the city of Monterrey. That's up for grabs too. While there's not casinos getting firebombed anymore or headless bodies swinging from freeway overpasses, Monterrey's huge population and massive demand for drugs has caused organizations from Sinaloa, Jalisco, the Gulf, and the Northeast Cartel to kill each other for market share. From neighboring Monterrey to the south in Tampico and San Luis Potosí, to the west in Zacatecas and Ciudad Juarez, to the north in Nuevo Laredo and Matamoros, the state of Coahuila is an island surrounded by vicious cartel fighting.
These groups, they are the ones who we've had the most contact with, who we have to fight. Why? Well, because it's a space, a territory that they want. It is a space that the Zetas, or the legacy of the Zetas, have left for them. I think there are a lot of people who are now getting out of prison, who worked for the Zetas back then, and now they're getting out of prison and returning to Nuevo Laredo. They know the territory, they know the roads, they know Coahuila, and they want to return here. Because right now, they know that there's no ruling cartel here. They say the only people that we would have to fight here are the police. And in other places, that wouldn't be the case. They would have to fight the police, the military, the National Guard, as well as the other cartels that are there. We're not finished. It's not over yet. We've entered another phase of the war, in which we have military superiority. We have more intelligence, and we have more personnel. We've entered another phase.
Yet somehow, Sombra and his men managed to keep the bad guys at bay. There's still crime in Coahuila, of course. In the city of Saltillo, there's a robust meth market, but it's operated by independent dealers who run local trap houses, just like in America. Cartels from meth-making regions might drop the work off to them as they're passing through, but that's the extent of it. On our last night in Coahuila, Sombra took us out on a raid of one of these punto de ventas, or sales points. I'm not sure they had a warrant either, to be quite honest. I think they were just trying to impress us. Knowing that a Mexican tactical unit organized a last-minute raid on a crystal meth trap house without a judge's authorization did make me feel special. Anything for the content. These guys get it. It was all over in 30 seconds, and it was quite unimpressive. A couple of out-of-town, smoked-out junkies with a few rocks and some paraphernalia, not to mention a sick infatuation with Santa Muerte, is all the cops found.
Yeah, it was just your run-of-the-mill meth house.
It was a horrible meth house.
That
with
was
some very dark probably going on in there.
Oof.
I mean, the smell, you recognize that smell, right?
I didn't. I don't have much crystal meth experience.
That is a lot of crystal meth. That is a lot of people basically living for the drug, and also it's a sales point. That's what.
Are they selling out of there?
Yep.
Do they know that?
They were outside, and then they ran inside. So that is probably their excuse to go into that space.
Oh, no. Okay, so basically, the first unit of cops, they were driving up the street in this known kind of barrio poor, ghetto, drug-using neighborhood. They saw these cristaleros, these drug users. The users saw the cops, they ran inside, so that is the excuse to go in without a warrant. I don't know what the rules are around getting warrants in Mexico, but
So I was a cop for a long time, and I can tell you not many rules. And you know, these people probably won't have adequate representation.
do they get lawyers?
Not really. Not really. The system is built in such a way where, you know, specifically in a place like this where everything is basically behind the cops and supporting them. I think these guys are probably, these drug users and salesmen are probably going to be in the hole for a bit because of this. Just from what I read from that room, there were some people there that probably manage money that don't live there, and some people that just guarded that sales point.
I see. So that's like a crack house in the U.S. where you can come in, buy, get high,
yeah,
until you're out of money and then bounce.
At least one or two of those people were probably there, like managing it, like living there.
Yeah.
And some of these people that had, you know, a lot of jewelry probably don't live there.
Well, one guy said he was from Monterrey. So this is probably a big market. So there's just big money selling dope in Mexico.
Yes.
And people forget that. Like a lot of the cartels aren't even aren't even bothering to export.
People don't talk about the local drug markets, which are a very big part of why the violence continues in Mexico. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want that guy selling in my corner, or I can't see the head kingpin of this group, but I can see his sales point people, so I'll shoot them.
Yeah.
And that's why some of this violence gets reported happening constantly, because it's just a war between marketing agencies, basically.
Right. It's fascinating to think that originates from the money from a guy in Culiacan who's playing golf at a country club.
Probably, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yes.
Or somebody in Guadalajara who's putting money behind a guy who knows guys that are making batches of it.
Yeah, it's people, yeah. And also, it's still here. Despite all of the efforts that this government here has done to combat all of the people that wanted to take over this place, substances are still here. People are still hooked. Mm-hmm. People are still going away for selling it.
The commander of the operation assured me off camera that the suspects would be taken out of the station, but not before getting a little Mexican persuasion. Maybe it's la bolsa or el agua, a plastic bag over the head, or a waterboarding like a prisoner of war in Baghdad. They'll get these guys to hand over their supplier before the night's over. We even had a little laugh about it. In Mexico, sometimes that's all you can do. What is the secret to this place, Coahuila? And why is this obscure, little talked about region able to keep out Mexico's most powerful criminal groups? On the surface, it seems like a miracle. The real question is, can this be repeated in the rest of the country?
Do you think the federal government could stop cartels by implementing tactics, by supporting the different states, and by operating the way that you guys operate? Because this is a really special example of how law enforcement is able to take back regions, but they're not doing it in the rest of Mexico.
I think that they can, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's a process, and it starts with cleansing corporations, professionalizing them, and ensuring that everyone working within the organization has a common goal. It's work, and it's a hard, slow, time-consuming process.
Do you think Mexico will get there, though? Like in your lifetime?
I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no.
is there going to be any kind of like softening of the war on drugs against drug users?
Drugs have been like quantities, personal use stuff has been codified into the law, but realistically that doesn't matter to people that just want these sales points that are making their neighborhood bad to go away. So people will get their doors kicked in and dragged out.
Are there any like third, fourth strike? Like if these guys have a long rap sheet, are they going away for longer? Or is it just all depend on the quantity and the judge and the circumstances?
They'll get, if they don't have any way to fight it or have anybody to pay for representation, they're gonna get, and people will go away for long periods just waiting for their case to be heard.
But until then, Sombra and his men will stay ready.
All these Marines and all these big tough looking military guys, they went and busted up like a bunch of guys drinking in public, which is so funny to me. Like that must seem like a good problem to have, right? Like you used to get videos of your compadres getting beheaded and you used to have to get in giant firefights with cartel tanks. And now you just kind of get to, you kind of have like easier crime to deal with. That must be, do you feel like a sense of pride? You're like, oh yeah, all we have to do is arrest a bunch of drunks.
Bored.
Okay, that's all for this week, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment and make sure to subscribe to the channel. My name is Johnny Mitchell, and you've been watching The Connect. We'll see you next time.